Decide where you want your flowers to be by having a look at the picture and sketching some in, and then think about masking. Paint on some of the flower shapes and leaves with masking fluid, and then leave it to dry thoroughly. You can tell when it's dry because the masking fluid goes darker, whether it's the blue or the yellow, and to touch it'll be slightly sticky to touch, but won't come off, won't stick to your finger. Touch test. Oh, that's fine. About 5 minutes with the hairdryer to get it to dry. Naturally, in a warm room, it takes about 15 minutes unless it's really thick. This is a puddle of sap green, ready for a background wash. I think I might do some patches of some darker green too, so I'm going to add some blue into it, some ultramarine blue into a second puddle. With sap green and ultramarine. My next stage is to wet my paper with some clean water, so I'm just going to refresh that. Ready to wet the paper from top to bottom. I don't want great big puddles, but I want the paper to be damp. And I can see if it's wet enough by tilting it, and I can get a sheen. I can see the sheen of the water on top. Trying to get it in the camera. See the sort of shine of the light on it there as I tilt it. So that's got enough, that's wet enough there without it being in great big puddles. So time to add some of the colour. It will dry lighter. I'm relatively happy with that. It looks a bit pale in places. Because I've got lots of details, leaves and things to put on the top, I haven't got to worry about it being a really tidy, even wash. Add a bit more drama in, I think. Next step, leave it to dry. And I'm going to start adding some stems next, and I'm going to use a rigger. You see alizarin crimson, alizarin crimson. And I just want to add in some bold stems. I can paint directly over the flowers I've already got there and details because they're masked, so when I clear the mask away I'll have the lovely white paper underneath to paint the flowers on. I might even hint at some flowers in the background. This as well. Nothing detailed. Just gives the crimson just gives a bit of variety, so it's not all just green and green and green. I want some quite blue-green stems, so I'm going to use some ultramarine because I like it a lot. It's just a strong blue really, and I think I'll use some viridian with it actually too. Quite a strong colour. Okay, I'm just going to go for some more, just more grasses, more leaves. be using the background wash for the main area of leaf, of grass. But these will add some details. Just making sure they're not all going in exactly the same direction too, otherwise that would look really rather boring. Okay, so the next colour I want to work with is some sap green. Mixing it nice and strong, so quite a lot of paint, not too much water. And again, adding in some grass leaves. It won't show so much as the one you've just added because it's very similar to the background now, but it'll give it a bit of depth. It's really just stroking it on. Just realised I've neglected one side a bit with the dark blue, so I'm going to go the blue-green mix. Okay. And the last one I'm going to do is I want some yellow, so I'm going to use cadmium yellow, but I'm also going to mix in a little of the white. That should give it a bit of opacity, so it should be a little bit opaque, so it will show up. Okay, time to remove the masking fluid. Just going to rub it with my finger gently and it should go off. Hopefully not pulling off the surface of the watercolour paper. It's when you do this you can see how important it is to put the masking fluid in the right place. Although you can soften the lines that it leaves, that hard white edge, you can make it softer but with a little bit of water on your brush. But if it's completely in the wrong place, it's not so easy to disguise. Okay, let's clear that away. think I'll start with the daisies. Okay, so I'm going to start some cadmium yellow and place that into the centre of my daisies. Just 2 daisies and a dandelion. Now it is a little big. I'm going to use the advantage of using this brush to make some petal shape marks. Throughout. Then I'm going to use the vermilion with the cadmium yellow to get a nice rich orange. Just to put some sort of shadow and colour into the petals. Daisies. I think I'll also use some of this, a little bit richer, on my daisies. Just using one of the corners of the brush to just build up a bit of shadow. I think I also want a bit more depth in this daisy dandelion, whatever it is, with a bit of burnt umber added in there. Not convinced. Right, take some of that out the back. So yellow ochre mixed with some lemon yellow and some sap green, because I want decided it's sort of getting a bit later in the summer, so I want the green seed head, but I don't want it bright green anymore. It's got to dull off a bit. Actually, that's not the seed head, is it? That's the case. This one is the seed head. Quite a nice green for the stems, actually, of the white flower. Very technical, the white flower. The little hairs on the poppy stem are great if you turn your brush around the wrong way, and with the handle you drag out some of the paint and it creates tiny hair marks on the poppy stem. But it only works if the paint's still wet, so it's quite hard to see in this video. I'm using some sap green over the top of the green, yellow-green mix I made. I can do another one nearby that's not been wet first. I've used a bit of blue there to make a turn in the petals so there was a bit of shadow. I might quite like it on in there too. Just remember, some of that crimson needs to go into the poppy heads that aren't quite out yet. Not crimson, the scarlet, the bright red. And a hint of it on the stem, like a blush. Using a purple here to put in some shadow. Might be a bit too heavy. I'm going to have to wait for that to dry there before I can put anything else in, otherwise it will just run straight into it, which I don't want. Use some ochre for the stem. I'm going to put the turquoise shadows on the daisies now. I quite like them just left white, but they need to have some shaders, some detail on, I think. That might be a bit strong. Let's put something into that California poppy. Put just the yellow onto the top there. I'm hoping it will just feed down into it very slightly. You need a leaf. Go back to that poppy now. It's dry enough. Using some blue for some really heavy shading. Now that looks quite strong, but it's quite watery, so it will dry a lot lighter as it dries. Dab a bit off. There should be a few more stems of grass in the foreground and things overlaying, so I'm going to lift some paint. I'm going to use the bristle brush, which is unusual for watercolour, but it's really good for taking out paint you don't want there anymore. So with a wet brush or a damp brush, I can then sweep across where I want to lift the paint, then damp it down with the tissue, and you can probably see a nice clean stripe that I can fill in with other details. I think I've forgotten the flowers in the background, so I need some background flowers to just go in there now, hints of them. Brush is too dry. On looking at it again, I decided to add a background and a few plants that sort of drifted off into the distance.